Hello, everyone. Welcome to Spirited Discussion, a Spirit Island podcast. In today's episode, we're going to be bringing you Jagged Earth, the second expansion to Spirit Island after Branch and Claw. I'm Kalen.
And I'm Alex. Today we're going to be talking about the new rules, tokens, keywords. We're going to be talking about the new cards in all the decks, and we're going to be talking about the spirits and the aspects. We're going to be saving the Adversaries, scenarios, extra game board mode, playing without events, and all the other weird stuff that Jagged Earth rulebook goes over. We'll be talking about all that in a future episode coming fairly soon. But for now, we're going to stick to kind of the main bulk of the core content in Jagged Earth, because goodness, there are so many things in Jagged Earth, we couldn't talk about everything in this one episode.
Yeah, we went back and forth a little bit on whether we would try and condense it all down, and we just didn't think we'd be able to do it justice if we had to try and squeeze it all into our usual episode length. So 2 episodes.
And let us start off with the most jagged of Earth pieces, Badlands. Kalen, would you like to tell us what Badlands do?
So Badlands are a token. They're the 5th token in the game, and they're really cool. They increase the damage to living things, or to humans specifically. So they don't increase damage to the land. So if if a single explorer ravages in a land with a Badlands, it still doesn't blight. But if an explorer and a Dahan are in a land with a Badlands and the invader ravages, it deals 2 damage to the Dahan instead. So that's not great, right? Except all of your spirit powers, all of them that deal damage, get a bonus.
Ooh.
Do you want to talk a little bit, Alex, about the action rules around that, though? I know there's some limitations on it.
Yeah, so I'm glad that they saved this specific token for Jagged Earth, splitting it off from Branch and Claw, because if there's any token that kind of needs a little bit of extra rules knowledge, it's this one. So yeah, in addition to only damaging Dahan and invaders extra and not the land, it also only adds 1 damage to each action. And the action rules mean that each card is an action, right? Each power is an action. Each ravage is an action.
Each ravage in each land, yeah. So each individual land that ravages is 1 ravage action.
Yeah, there's some specifics to that, but it basically means if you have a card that says 1 damage to 1 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage, 1 damage, the Badlands would only affect one of those 1 damages. Now, granted, you could pick which damage it does. Like if it says 1 damage to towns and then 1 damage to explorers, you could have the Badlands add it to the damage to towns specifically. It doesn't have to be the first one or the last one or anything like that. But it does mean that you don't get some sort of amazing boost if you're if you have an innate power that does damage multiple times.
Yeah, there's some spirits that have interactions with that. I think the most obvious one's going to be Volcano, that we'll talk about in a little bit, with Pyroclastic Flow. Pyroclastic Bombardment, I think it's called. I'm blanking on the unique's name, but that one does damage in a few different spots, and it's kind of confusing how that interacts with Badlands, which the spirit also happens to use.
Yeah, once you get it down, it's not that complicated. And also worth noting that Badlands are one of those tokens, kind of like Wilds, that will not come up every game. If you're playing a Badlands-focused spirit, sure, they'll come up. And of course, there's a myriad of power cards that use them, but there are many games you'll go by without even seeing a single Badlands. You have to kind of intentionally use them. They're not like Disease or Beasts that start off on the board. And actually, speaking of all that, Badlands in Jagged Earth have 4 event cards, 2 fear cards, 9 major, 7 minor, and 6 uniques that interact with the Badlands. Not all of those add Badlands, they just interact with them. And then, of course, all of your damage-dealing powers are going to interact by being boosted by the Badlands. So it's not the most common of effects.
Yeah, I think, though, that just interacting with all damage effects is part of why Badlands are probably my favorite token. I think Badlands, I've heard a claim that Badlands are a little bit undercosted, but on the flip side, damage is overcosted, and so it wasn't really obvious that there was any kind of costing error there until they started making better damage effects in later expansions like Horizons and Nature Incarnate. But yeah, Badlands, I just love the +1 damage or +2 damage. I just love these kinds of modifiers that get to be used again and again and again. And I probably actually overuse Badlands because of that, where, if a card said deal 1 damage, that damage doesn't heal, I wouldn't like it very much. Whereas if says add a Badlands, I'll be like, yeah, give me some more Badlands.
Badlands are definitely prone to being like nice combo pieces, especially because if you have a card that adds a Badlands, you can keep looping that card, and then the more Badlands there are in a land, the more it stacks. It's also interesting that Badlands, they're very hard to remove. There's a very scant amount of effects in the game that actually remove Badlands, and so even if you only have one card that adds a Badlands, there might still end up being Badlands all over the board by the end of the game, whereas your diseases, your wilds, your strife, and even your beasts often get just ripped off of the board, never to be seen again.
Yeah, these are sort of thematically like a permanent scarring of the land that makes it less hospitable to humans. And, it's kind of this really cool idea, and that's why they have the picture of, jagged shards pushing out of the earth, to reference another Spirits unique.
Most importantly, though, the premium tokens Badlands can be stood straight up. So, that's the best part about Badlands. But overall, Badlands are a great addition to the game, and they are very, you-oriented, whereas the rest of them are either based around invader actions or based around what happens in the event deck. Badlands are mostly, what you make of them, and I think that that's really cool. They have the power for some nice synergy.
Yeah. I really like them. I think I already said they're probably my favorite token, so I'll just go with that. Another cool new mechanic in this set is the isolate mechanic. Do you want to say what that one does, Alex?
Yes. So isolate is a keyword, as we'd say in Magic, I guess, where basically once you use it on a land, from then on, for the rest of the turn, you're able to decide whether that land is actually adjacent to all of the other lands next to it, and you're able to decide per action.
Yeah, and specifically for invaders. Isolate does nothing to Dahan, it does nothing to Blight. The Blight in particular can sometimes trip people up as well.
So the purpose of this primarily is to prevent explorers or adjacency builds in England or what have you, or your Habsburg pulling in, right? I believe it can stop that.
Absolutely.
So you're using this mostly to try to mess with the invaders' plans.
Yeah, and it can be really nice to help build pockets. It can really be nice to stop adjacency builds with England. It's one of those where I feel like it's kind of uninteresting at lower difficulties, but once you have a mid to high level adversary, isolate just becomes this very cool mechanic to have in the game.
Yeah, that makes sense. And there's only 4 minors and 4 majors in Jagged Earth that have isolate, and all of them do other things as well. There's no card in the game that just says isolate land. Everyone's aware that isolate on its own isn't always going to be that useful. But sometimes the other effects of the cards are useful, and having that isolate effect could have just a little bonus addition. Or, like you said, in those higher adversary situations, sometimes you can really mess with the invaders' game plans by isolating, and when that happens, it's satisfying.
Yeah, very much so.
However, when you use it just on a normal game and you're just trying to predict where they're going to explore next, it is underwhelming, I find.
Yeah, I will say that if always try to isolate the source rather than the destination if you can, if you're trying to stop explorers. Because if you've got that inland town, that's the land to isolate because that's what lets you pocket. You don't need to just guess, is it going to be the wetlands or the mountains? I don't know.
Yeah, if things are set up that way, sure.
Well, if things are set up that way, but yes.
Yeah, I agree that isolate's a fine mechanic, but being completely honest, if they took it out of the game, I wouldn't really be crying about it. Just comparing it to other things, I think Badlands would be a crying shame if it was out of the game. Isolate's the sort of thing where if you were to ask Spirit Island players, name a cool mechanic in the game, I don't know that anyone would be like, Isolate is my favorite. You know what I'm saying?
I wonder if that's actually true. I feel like we're going to get letters about that.
Yes, that's what we want, Kalen. We want the comments. Give us the comments. Tell us why Isolate's your favorite. Yeah.
Yeah, if Isolate's your favorite, let us know. So yeah, other than those, there's not too many crazy new rules in Jagged Earth. There are some other important pieces of content, though. Let's talk a little bit about the boards. There's 2 double-sided boards in the Jagged Earth box. The balanced sides are E and F, and the thematic sides are Southeast and Southwest. Do you have any real thoughts on these boards, Alex, or not so much?
No, not at all. I pick my boards randomly, so I just don't really have a lot to say about them. But what about you?
I mean, I pick my boards very intentionally a lot of the time. Uh, I think that I would say board E is a really, really good board, I think, generally for players. The land 6 and 7 orientation on that board, though, always throws me off. It's kind of got land 6 down in the bottom right corner and land 7 above it and to the left. And that just I just always throws me. I assume there's some balance reasons why it's supposed to be that way, but it just feels wrong.
Interesting. Of course, notably, this means that you can play with 6 players officially. I guess you could have before if you bought 2 versions of the base game, but yes, this is like a support for up to 6 players, and that's neat. More variety is neat.
Yeah, Southeast and Southwest, I think, were technically already in the game in some ways because there was like a neoprene promo mat that had them for this like full thematic island if you wanted to play 6 players before Jagged Earth.
Huh.
But I don't know. Southeast and Southwest are weird boards. Southwest in particular, because it only has 2 Dahan, it has 3 beast tokens on it, and there's no starting city. It's just a strange board.
We're definitely gonna have to do an episode on the thematic boards because I've never tried them and I've always been curious.
Oh yeah, we should. I definitely have opinions on everything, base and north. Less strong opinions on Southeast and Southwest, other than they feel strange to me because I haven't played them too much.
Fair. Okay.
So then we have a bunch of new cards.
Every deck got more cards. Every deck except the Invader deck, I guess.
No, that'll have to wait for Nature Incarnate.
Yes. But all the major decks got new cards. I kind of want to start with majors this time, if that's all right.
Yeah.
I have a hot take.
Okay.
All right. So I looked at the crop of majors in this set versus Branch and Claw and versus the base game, and I have to say, I think that this is the worst batch of them in terms of both like cards that I take frequently and cards that I think are like iconic to Spirit Island. I feel like Branch and Claw has a lot of them and base game has a lot of them. This set, I mean, there are a few powerful ones, there are a few cool ones. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of powerful ones, but I was looking over them and I'm like, I just don't recognize these cards as much as I do the other sets.
Yeah, I'm actually on the same page. Like Jagged Earth, I think the majors are one of its weakest offerings. Like it's a really good box, and part of the reason I like Branch and Claw so much is because of the major powers. If I had like the major power decks swapped between the two sets, I would not like Branch and Claw nearly as much.
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's kind of a weird way to think of it, but yeah. I don't know. The other thing is that I feel like a lot of the power names in Jagged Earth got almost too try hard. That's maybe the wrong way to put it. Like
it's a lot of words.
It's a lot of words. I don't know. And there's obviously some short ones. Like I looked through the list trying to come up with evidence for this, and I was like, okay, never mind. My point doesn't really make sense. But it just, some of these things feel really wordy to me. They're not as elegant.
No, I think you're right.
There's still some good powers in there in the major deck. I don't find myself getting enthused about them the same way I do about base game and Branch and Claw majors.
For sure. I mean, I would say like Unleash a Torrent of the Self-Zone Essence, Irresistible Call, and Weave Together the Fabric of Place are cards that I play somewhat frequently, and then that's mostly it out of these. I mean, I don't know, I play some of them sometimes, but yeah, no, I don't know. I just don't see a lot of like crazy effects. It's the thing too is that like a lot of them add tokens, which is fine. I like tokens a lot, but by this point, tokens are not necessarily like the new hotness. You know what I mean? Because this set is, if you have Branch and Claw, this set is just kind of like a little bit more of them. It's not as shiny or as exciting to say like, cool, add a wilds or something. Add 2 wilds.
Yeah, I think some of the powers, I when you mentioned the wilds, like Thickets Erupt with every touch of breeze, which another slightly mouthful of a name, being able to add 3 wilds at once, I find to be really cool, with just like saying, oh, let's see how much we can push adding this one token in multiples. and like, that's a cool idea.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like, that's not a new thing. That's still, it's sort of new, but it's not like, it doesn't feel revolutionary the same way that, adding wilds in the first place does.
Yes. Yeah, I'd say so. So, I mean, hey, there's definitely some cool cards in here. I'm not hating on it, but just objectively, of the groupings, there has to be one that's a little bit weaker, or that's the weakest, I suppose. And
Yeah.
I think it's this one.
What do you think of the miners, though?
Yeah, the miners are pretty awesome. I don't really have the same complaint about the miner deck. In fact, I'm not really sure like where I fall in terms of ranking them with the other ones. But like one of the things that's cool about this is that there's 3 defend cards in this set that are like beast themed. They either add beasts, or you get extra fear if there's beasts, or something like that. And I like those cards quite a bit. I feel like I play those cards quite often.
Yeah. There's some really fun, interesting, like, I feel like I've heard people talk about the Miner Power deck in Jagged Earth being a stealth buff for Sharp Fangs Behind the Leaves. Where some of the like plant animal powers that they added in are really good, and there's some interesting extra synergies that really kind of help out a lot with Fangs' game plan.
Yeah, I was specifically talking about Capriciated Land, which is defend, and if there's a beast in the land you're targeting, the power gets an extra range. There's Domestic Animals Go Berserk, which if you have 3 Moon, you get to add a beast on top of the defend. And there's Haunted by Primal Memories, which is 1 fear, defend 3, and then if you have a beast present, 2 more fear. Like I like that. I like that there's kind of like a suite of beast defends, and I find that they're not bad defend effects on their own.
No, and they also have a cool variety of elements across them. Like Haunted by Primal Memories doesn't have animal element. It has that beast synergy, but it's still doing something else with the card, and so that's kind of a cool variant.
They're spooky ghosts. They're not real beasts.
Yes.
They're made of air.
Yes.
Yeah, I think they're cool. I mean, shout outs to my boy Hazard Spread Across the Land.
Oh my goodness.
Love that card.
That card is so amazing. I love that. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but my favorite thing with Hazard Spread Across the Island is copying Badlands when you're playing as Vengeance, because it gets to treat Blight as Badlands.
You're just wrecking the island.
You're just wrecking the island left and right. Blight here, Badlands there. It's great.
Yep. Gift of Twin Days is really awesome.
Yeah.
That's a cool card that lets you copy the lowest cost power card that another spirit has in play, and you can do it as well. Yeah, cool stuff. We've already talked like great things about. I think Scream Disease Into the Wind we've spoken about, and it's awesome. Like, yeah, I don't know. Looking at these cards, it's like, yeah, most of these are awesome.
Yeah, I don't know that they're all like particularly powerful, and I don't know that they need to be either. Like, I think that the miner deck is actually reasonably well balanced here in Jagged Earth, where there's nothing that really stands out to me as particularly terrible. There are a couple cards that are really good, but I don't think any of them are kind of game breaking the way that like Growth Through Sacrifice was in Branch and Claw,
right?
Which of course has been removed because was too game breaking.
Yeah. And I mean, there's a handful of cards that are basically just like, add some tokens, which are not maybe the most like interesting things, but the game didn't go crazy with that sort of effect.
Well, except for Dire Metamorphosis, which did go crazy with that effect and just adds all the tokens that existed to a land.
Well, I just mean that there isn't like a ton of different cards that are just every variety of add 2 of these tokens. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
They could have gone crazy and really just made them boring cards, but other than like 1 or 2 of them, there's not many of them that are literally just add 2 tokens or add 1 token. They're always kind of like add a token and then do this, or add 2 tokens and do this. I like that they did that. And yes, of course, shout out to Dire Metamorphosis. We talked about it last week. Just cool card design.
Yeah,
for sure. So moving on.
Yeah, we've got the event deck. Now, the event deck in Jagged Earth is definitely very different feeling from the event deck in Branch and Claw. I feel like the main change is that the Jagged Earth events are a little more nuanced. Like, the cards aren't just good or bad, or like good if you have the one trigger and bad if you have the other trigger. It's more like they have good and bad stuff in each part of them. So like Remnants of a Spirit's Heart, I'm just picking one at random here, is a choice event. It's aided by Earth. If you don't pay for it, you get plus 10 health to all your Dahan, but also plus 1 health to all the invaders and lands with Dahan. If you do pay for it, all your defend gets lowered by 4 this turn, but on a future turn, you get to just give defend 4 to the whole island. And that's really cool. It's got this like plus and minus in both options. It's not just there's a bad option if you can't pay for it and a good thing if you do pay for it.
Yes. I find that the events in Jagged Earth are I don't know if I'd necessarily say they're less punishing, but at least you're right. It feels like you have more agency over what you're actually doing. Whereas, I mean, we talked about it in Branch and Claw, just the makeup of the deck. Even if you like the individual cards, it's a lot of choice events where if you can't afford to pay for the better choice, you're in for a bad time. And getting, I think those choice effects work a little better when you're not getting hammered with them over and over and over.
Yeah, I feel like the event deck, the downside of it being better balanced is that I don't think it leads to as many good stories as the Branch and Claw event deck does. And I guess what I'm trying to say there is, in Branch and Claw, there's a bunch of events that will come up and like, oh, I have this great story about the time when I hit Years of Little Rain right when I needed it, and it saved me and I won the game, and it was amazing. And I feel like the Jagged Earth events just don't do that as much, or at least there's less of them that I can think of those kinds of stories about. And maybe that's just I've played less with the Jagged Earth events, and so I need more experience with the expansion still, just because it hasn't been out in digital as long. And yeah, I don't know.
It's hard to assess the events because, I mean, every single one of these cards is 2 and usually 3 separate effects. And then on top of that, there's also the choices. Either you have a choice or you don't have a choice. I mean, certainly there are versions of effects that I've never seen in the game because, like, you know, I wasn't at fear level 3 when I drew the card or whatever. Just, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many permutations of things the event deck can do that without really, like, taking a fine-tooth comb, it's hard to go off of anything but kind of like it feels like this. You know what I'm saying? Like,
yeah.
Like I think you'd have to analyze it pretty deeply to really get down to the bottom of the stats of it. But just in terms of feeling, I think it feels better than the Branch and Claw one. And just with a lot of these decks, just adding the variety to the Branch and Claw deck when you're adding them together, the variety is good in general.
Yeah. I'd say that the event deck feels more complete with Jagged Earth. As much as I might criticize the lack of stories or praise the balance, I think there's something good about both event decks, both in Branch and Claw and in Jagged Earth, and I think they're best together.
I would be curious to see if anyone who wasn't sold on the Branch and Claw version of Offense came around to the idea of event cards after Jagged Earth. You know, like I'm sure there's some people out there that were staunchly against it and then kind of saw some of maybe the more variety and decided, you know what, this is for me. I'm not sure.
I feel like I've heard that story, but I don't know that I could point to it. So, but yeah, I don't know. That'd definitely be interesting to hear about. Yeah.
All right. So let's talk about each fear card because there is not so many of them. 6 of them.
Yeah. I think that 2 of them are strife-based, Nerves Fray and Theological Strife. And I don't really like Nerves Fray very much. It's the add a strife in a land not matching a Ravage card. And so, like, sometimes it works really well because you're going to put it on a town in a land that's building or something like that, and that's going to let you get your defend high enough to take care of the city. But it also sometimes just means, oh, I guess I get to strife this random explorer here, and that's kind of boring.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword of the strife sort of things. And worth noting that level 2 and 3 also stick to that. You can never add it to something ravaging, which I feel like that's a letdown. I feel like stage 3 should have just been you get to add it to any land.
There is something cool though about stage 3 having 1 fear per player, which is it's a fear card that can earn you another fear card during the fear phase, which
that's pretty sweet.
Is really cool. Like that sometimes can just win you the game out of nowhere. And there's not a ton of fear cards that can do that.
Yeah. So Theological Strife is each player adds a strife in a land with their presence, and then they get to add more with stage 2 and 3. I kind of feel like this might have a similar. Well, I don't know. This has an issue of like if there are no invaders in lands with your presence or with anyone's presence.
Yeah,
it's just a dud card. But I guess that can happen.
I mean, it's one of those again that kind of like Isolate. I think lower difficulty it's going to be less useful. Higher difficulty it's going to be more useful.
That's fair. And I mean, I am, in general, a big fan of having strife on fear cards. I feel like, as a token, it just makes sense, right? They're terrified, and so they're feeling the effects of it, you know?
Yeah. So a couple of the other cards have sort of a removal or damage effect. There's Sense of Dread, which does let you take things out of Ravage cards, which is cool. And then Flee from Dangerous Lands, which Terror 1 only pushes things from, a land with Badlands, Wilds, or Dahan, and then at higher levels lets you actually remove things. And those are both, pretty bread and butter kinds of fear cards, I feel like. I don't know that either of them really stands out to me as particularly special.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they're all right. There's generally always a use for them because of Dahan. Even if Badlands or Wilds aren't anywhere, Dahan are generally somewhere.
Exactly.
And then speaking of Dahan being somewhere, Dahan Reclaim Fishing Grounds is each player chooses a different coastal land with Dahan in each 1 damage per Dahan, and then in later effects you're able to gather them and then do more damage with the Dahan. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. This is a really cool card. I think that this is one of those, like, a terror level 1 fear card that can, like, destroy a coastal city. That's kind of nuts, potentially. It can also whiff, but it's really cool.
This is irresistible call fodder if I've ever seen it. Yeah. So, yeah, pretty cool. Yeah. And then lastly, we have Beset by Many Troubles, which is one of Kalen's favorite types of cards. Just defend all over the island. In each land with Badlands, Beasts, Strife, Disease, or Wilds, defend 3 or defend 5 or defend 3 in its land and adjacent lands. So basically, this is the defend everywhere card.
Yeah, this card is probably one of the AoE defends I actually enjoy.
Okay.
Mostly because I've had it come up at Terror 3 on digital before and just watched all my defend numbers spiral up into the 40s.
Yeah.
And I was like, how did that happen? Oh, okay, this card is hilarious.
If you've just been spreading tokens all over the island like a madman, this thing can save your bacon and then some. I think I sent you a one of my games with Fangs in preparation for that episode where I just had like defend 16 and 20 and 30 like all over the island. Very fun. Very fun. Good payoff to spreading tokens. And the fact that it's applicable to all 5 tokens is cool, because there's always going to be, there should always be at least 1 token on your island, right?
Maybe. I don't know. Maybe your disease got used up and your beast got destroyed.
All right. Maybe your calamity is no longer pent up and there's no more tokens.
Nope.
I don't know. But yeah, no. Cool batch of cards. Nothing like too crazy exciting, but none of them are too bad.
No, not at all. Now, if we want to talk about things that are bad, let's talk about some blight cards.
Oh boy. All right, I think that the still healthy for now rant has been building in Kalen for a little while.
It's not a rant.
We've avoided mentioning we've almost mentioned these cards a few times. But basically this set introduced the concept of still healthy islands cards, which are flipped blight cards that turn out to still be healthy. So for all effects that care about it with like events, the island is considered still healthy, but they are generally negative effects.
Yeah. So the 2 still healthy island cards in Jagged Earth are Invaders Find the Land to Their Liking, which adds fear markers to the fear pool, which is rough. I remember hearing about a game against England 6, I have to mention England, where normally it's 5 fear per player, so you've already got it increased some, and then they flipped Invaders Find the Land to Their Liking, got it up to 6 fear per player. So 2-player game, 12 fear for 1 fear card is kind of nuts.
Yeah, and of course the insult to that as well is that it still only puts two blight per player on the card, so it may not stay healthy for too long anyway.
Exactly. Then the other still healthy island card in Jagged Earth is Strong Earth Shatters Slowly, and this is actually probably my favorite of the still healthy cards. Is immediately each player adds a blight from this card to a land adjacent to blight, 2 blight per player. Pretty straightforward, risks getting some bad cascades, but gives you a little extra blight budget to work with. And I don't know, I guess the rant, as it were, about the still healthy island cards is that blight as a resource is not linear, is that the more blight you have taken, the more painful each subsequent blight will be. So like the difference between a card that has 7 blight per player on it and a card that has 10 blight per player on it isn't that much. Just because if you've actually gotten down to the end of the 7 blight per player card, you are going to have so much blight on the island that you're going to be having cascades left and right. And those last 3 blight per player are just going to evaporate.
That makes sense.
It's not like the still healthy island cards are inherently bad because of that. I just don't enjoy it when they flip. I much prefer the low blight, good effect for the player, tense cards that don't feel like I'm delaying the game in a way that is kind of disingenuous.
Interesting. Okay.
So that's my rant. There's my rant.
No, I think what you say makes sense. Would you feel differently if these cards said blight removed from here cannot be used to cascade?
I feel like that would be so hard and fiddly to make it work that I mean, yes. If like you had a still healthy island card that says if blight would cascade, instead it doesn't, and had like one blight per player on it and some other bad stuff to make up for it, that would be kind of interesting. But like, I don't know. I feel like that would be a dangerous direction to go with with development.
Okay. I was just saying hypothetically.
Yeah.
I mean, I think as a design space, still healthy island cards are really interesting. Like I like that they exist in the game, because there are a lot of event cards that if the island is healthy, you're getting a much better effect. And it does kind of in some ways feel like, I don't know, like you're being saved. But I do agree these are a little bit nasty effects, because ultimately the strong shatters the earth slowly is just, it's extra blight on the island, and then assuming it doesn't just cascade and flip immediately, what, you're left with one blight per player on that card. Like, yeah. That's tight. And then adding fear to the fear pool is
it's not tough. Unmanageable, but it makes the game very different in a way that I don't usually enjoy. I really like these tempo builds. I like these aggro strategies. And when you get a still healthy island, usually what that means is your game is going to slow down. And that's sometimes exactly what you want, but usually that's not what I want. So that's just a personal preference thing.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, no, I like that these cards exist, but I do hear your point, and I don't really disagree, to be honest with you. But there is definitely, it adds to the excitement of flipping the blight card.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Yeah.
If you know that there's still some healthy stuff in there. So other Blighted Island cards in this set is Unnatural Proliferation, which is immediately each spirit adds one presence to a land with their presence, and then on each board add a Dahan to a land with Dahan and 2 cities to the land with the fewest towns/cities. What do you think about this one?
Oh, this one's awesome. I love this one. The idea of like everyone gets a power up. The spirits get a power up, you get more Dahan, and the invaders get a major power up with 2 extra cities. Like, this one is like the kind of thing I want out of a blight card.
And if you've done a good job and this doesn't flip until late in the game, you might have a sweet major power that can deal 6 damage, and boom, killing 2 cities at once is good for you.
Yeah. Well, and also like if you have a board that has no buildings on it, the 2 cities require minimum 1 building in their land to be added. So like this could flip and it's all good stuff.
Fair.
Although admittedly, if you have a board that has no buildings on it, you're probably doing pretty well anyway. So that's maybe not the most necessary thing.
So this is like the anti-still healthy card for you, because it accelerates the game basically in one way or the other.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. I like Unnatural Proliferation a lot.
All right. All things weaken?
Yeah, all things weaken. Ongoing starting next turn, invaders and Dahan have -1 health to a minimum of 1. The land takes blight on 1 less damage, which is normally 1 damage. And when you add blight, it destroys all presence and beasts in that land and 1 presence total in an adjacent land. 3 blight per player.
I don't like it.
This one is terrifying. I'm really glad it exists, but it is terrifying.
Yeah. I mean, whenever it's such the case that 1 explorer can blight a land, it's mean.
Well, and that blight destroys all your presence too. Yeah. It raises the stakes in an interesting way, I think. I think the big saving grace for me with this card is that it's ongoing starting next turn. If it was immediate, it would be just too punishing, I think.
Okay.
But starting next turn means that you actually have some time to prep for it and get used to it. You don't immediately have to like think about redoing all your damage calculations because the Dahan have less health or because the invaders have less health. So I think it's a really cool card. I think it makes for very, like I talked about cards that make good stories not being in the event deck. All Things Weaken is a blight card that makes good stories.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm glad it exists. There needs to be scary cards, but yeah, no, I'd be very curious of what my win percentage is whenever this card pops up.
Yeah. Next blight card is Thriving Communities. Do you want to talk about that one, Alex?
Yeah, so immediately on each board, in 4 different lands with explorers/towns, replace 1 town with 1 city, or replace 1 explorer with 1 town. 4 blight for player. I like this card. I think that in a lot of cases, it's replace 4 explorers with 4 towns, which is not the worst thing, depending on where you're at in the game. It's something that obviously does buff the invaders, but it doesn't feel too mean.
Yeah, I think I also like this one in that it kind of rewards, how do I say it? One of the theories I have about how to play Spirit Island is this idea that a couple big problems are easier to deal with than a lot of small problems. And this card really incentivizes making a couple of big problems instead of a lot of small problems.
Okay. That makes sense. It does also reward you for playing well, right? If you've knocked a bunch of the towns off your board and there's only really 1 or 2 towns, you only you're only getting a few cities as opposed to getting a lot of cities if there's a lot of towns.
Yeah, it's a cool card.
Yeah.
I like it a lot more than the Still Healthy cards.
Okay.
if I can keep bashing those.
All right, next one.
Yeah, Power Corrodes the Spirit. At the start of each invader phase, each spirit destroys one of their presence if they have 3 or more power cards in play, or have a power card in play costing 4 or more printed energy. 4 blight per player.
This is the kinder version of the base game blight cards.
Yeah, this is a much more interesting variant, I think, on the whole downward spiral memory fades to dust. Mm-hmm. It's and this one and the next one actually, Untented Land Crumbles, which I guess I'll just say quick is at the start of each invader phase on each board, add a blight to a land adjacent to blight. Spirits may prevent this on any or all boards. Each board to be protected requires jointly paying 3 energy or destroying 1 presence from that board.
Yeah.
So both of these cards basically, in the worst case, are like Downward Spiral, where you just destroy a presence each turn on each spirit. And in the best case, are way more interesting to play with.
Yeah. I think it's necessary at this point because there's so many spirits that have such different game plans, that some can place a lot of presence down and some can't. I think it's kind of necessary to give people a little more of a choice, right? If you have a bunch of energy, cool. You pay the energy and you don't worry about it in Crumbles. And then in Power Corrodes, if your spirit is still struggling to kind of get up and running, you won't be punished at all.
Yeah, if you're playing just sort of a couple of either cheap majors or uniques, Power Corrodes the Spirit isn't going to do anything to you. But once you start really getting into gear, you're starting to have to pay that presence each turn. It's a trade-off that's interesting to make as opposed to just punishing.
Mm-hmm. And there are times where okay, so this card comes up and then you can, going forward, you can take a turn to kind of play under the radar so you don't get your presence destroyed, and then, get more presence on the board, and then you can start kind of ramping up. It gives you ways to play around them, which is just neat. So these 2 are cool, and I would say that overall this is a good, interesting bunch of blight cards to add.
Yeah, I think that all of the Blighted cards are really interesting in this set. I mean, obviously I complained about Still Healthy a bunch, but it's still good that they're in the game, I think, as you said, and I'm really glad. I for just having added 7 new blight cards to the game, I think Jagged Earth does a great job with the 7 it chooses.
Yeah, and by this point, there's enough blight cards that the Still Healthy cards aren't going to come up all that often.
No,
if you're truly randomizing it. But yeah, no, I guess you could say adding them is still healthy to the game.
All right, I think we're going to take a quick break here, and then we're going to come back and we're going to talk about the spirits.
Woo!
And we are back. All right, we're talking about Jagged Earth, and we're going to talk about the spirits next. The first thing, though, that we want to go into is not actually the spirits in Jagged Earth, but rather the aspect cards that change spirits from the base game.
Ooh.
There's 6 aspects in Jagged Earth. Alex, do you have some thoughts on these aspects?
So I'd never touched any aspect until a few days ago. And this is the first time that I've played with any of them, and I decided to play a mega game with all 4 of the base game spirits, each one of them having an aspect on. And I've also I've played a few games after, just kind of with 2 of them and some aspects, and I'm a little bit mixed. I think the concept of aspects in general, fantastic concept. So glad it was added to the game, and regardless of what we think about these ones, there are some really cool ones later on, for sure.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, no, my overall feelings with these is that they do some cool things. They make these base game spirits a little bit spicier. They give them like second innate powers, which is really cool. But they don't fix my like fundamental beef with these spirits. That is, they don't touch the growths and they don't touch the presence tracks. And so, even though it is cool to have ways of making like lightning more interesting, you still end up with that bizarre like you're stuck in terms of card economy. You know, like there's still no better way to get cards except for that reclaim growth. There's just nothing else that helps that, and that stinks. I think that that's kind of one of the biggest gripes I have with these base game low complexity spirits is their growth and their presence tracks being uninteresting and low powered and kind of like railroading you into a strategy or two. And I just don't think these fix that.
I don't want to talk about them too much, but I think that some of the later aspects that come out not in the Jagged Earth box might do a little more of addressing what you're thinking about. But let's focus on just the Jagged Earth ones for now. I'll start with let's talk about lightning, because lightning is, I think, a spirit that its reclaim loop strategy is fairly well known in the community. And I don't think that either of its aspects in Jagged Earth does all that much to change that.
It doesn't give it more energy, and it doesn't give it more cards.
Yeah. I do like Wind Lightning a lot. Wind Lightning gives Lightning a second innate, which sort of changes the way that its speeding up powers mechanic works. And I think it's really kind of cool. It also gives it a plus range boon that it can give to itself and to a teammate. There's a little more to it than that, but I just really like Wind Lightning. I hadn't really played it much until Digital came out with Jagged Earth, and I've found that it's kind of replaced base Lightning for me as my favorite way to play Lightning lately.
Interesting.
As you said, it doesn't really like fix the core reclaim loop issues that Lightning has, but it does change the way that I think about the spirit, which I think does mean something. I think there's some value to that.
Mm-hmm. This is the one that's innate ability lets it now give someone else a fast power, right?
Yeah, So for one air, you and another spirit can each make one of your non-major powers fast. For 3 air, you get to get +1 range, and then I think it's 4 air, and I'm mixing up what the threshold is, and I don't have it up in front of me. So it's cool. And like Wind Lightning plus Ocean is a hilarious combo. We talked about how Ocean likes plus range and also getting things sped up. And so I just love that 2-spirit combo as part of a team or on its own. And so that's really, I think, playing those two together is what got me to like Wind Lightning. The other lightning aspect in this box is Pandemonium Lightning. And Pandemonium Lightning is bonkers in terms of its fear generation potential. But it also sort of has the same gameplay plan as base Lightning. It's just now, instead of destroying towns and cities, you throw Strife on them and hopefully Harbingers helps you get Dahan into counterattack.
Yes, yeah, I think it's a cool implementation of the new tokens. It was also kind of fun to pair up Pandemonium with Shadows' Strife-based aspect and kind of just go Strife heavy on everyone. Yeah. Pretty cool. And yeah, I liked Wind too. I like Wind more than base Lightning as well. I think base Lightning makes it so that basically most of your slow powers are just going to be fast because of your special rule. Like you don't have to think about it too much because air is on a lot of cards. Whereas with Wind, you don't get everything to be fast, but allowing other spirits to kind of share in that cheat outside of your boon card I think is a lot more flexible and a lot more fun.
Yeah, being able to split Lightning's boon plus your Wind innate to 2 different spirits is also really cool for speeding up multiple people on the same turn.
Yes, and the fact that this power is only for non-major powers, whereas the boon can still hit major powers, it makes it different enough that it doesn't feel super redundant.
I think they're both solid aspects. I do think that they're not transformative in either of them, but I don't really want to begrudge them that. I think that of the aspects in this box, actually Wind and Pandemonium are probably the most interesting ones. So kind of starting on a high note for myself with those.
All right, let's move on to River's aspect, Sunshine.
Yeah, Sunshine. Sunshine is something I want it to work better than it does.
So weirdly, this takes away one of your power cards. You start with 3 power cards.
So you don't get Boon of Vigor, which Boon of Vigor is a huge part of base River's kit, and it's part of why River is so strong in combos, is because they can just feed energy to a teammate. Sunshine can also feed energy to a teammate, but it takes way more setup, and it starts really... It outpaces Boon of Vigor by the end of the game, usually, but it takes a long time to get there. And so, you know, given how much I talk about loving tempo, Sunshine just Sunshine is like saving up 10 mana to play a giant creature in Magic the Gathering. It's not going to work very well most of the time, but if it ever does work, it's really cool.
Yeah, it is nice that you're able to consistently feed energy to Lightning if you're playing with them, but it's just not it's not a lot of energy. It's not exciting, and as you said, it's not like as good as the Boon. I really don't understand what they're thinking with this one. Like, what is the purpose of having this in the game?
I mean, to me, the purpose is to try and incentivize going top track on River. Is base River has such a good bottom track build that no one ever deviates from it once they learn it, unless they're just trying to, you know, explore or be silly. Sunshine River actually says, oh, hey, your top track matters, and it matters a lot. And it can give tons of energy to you and to a teammate. It encourages River to maybe play majors a little bit more. And overall, like, I like what they're trying to do with it. I just think that this implementation doesn't actually accomplish what it set out to do, unfortunately.
It just doesn't move the needle that much. It's just not that interesting. I don't know. At least, like, you can certainly say that some of the other aspects add in tokens, right? They add in Strife to these spirits, where Strife didn't really exist. Well, Strife didn't exist in the base game, so it kind of gives them a way to interface more with the newer mechanics. Whereas this power is just, it's fine. It's whatever. I don't think I'd purposely play Sunshine River again, though, personally.
I probably will, but that's mostly, I think, because I want to make it work, or I want to find ways to make it at least feasible. But yeah, it's not... I don't know. I think Sunshine's biggest claim to fame that I've heard is that it's easier to beat high-level England with Sunshine than it is with base River, because those games tend to go long, and so you have more time to ramp up and that kind of thing. But yeah, I don't know. That's not enough of a saving grace for me, unfortunately.
The reason why I did try to play this 4-spirit game, which, by the way, I lost because it was my first time playing 4 spirits at one time, and I played against Brandenburg Prussia's level 4. So, you know, but part of the reason why I did it was just because a lot of these powers are very much boosting other spirits, and the more spirits you have in play, the more each power that can boost a spirit, the higher the value goes up, right? The chances that one of those spirits could really take advantage of something like this it goes up, and so I kind of feel like the aspects were designed to be played that way, just all together. But yeah, moving on.
Yeah. So another one of the spirits that you mentioned to me earlier that was in that game, I believe, was Madness Shadows.
It was the one with Strife.
Yeah, Madness. So
Yes.
You place a presence, you get to add a Strife to an invader in that land. When one of your presents is destroyed, you get to generate a fear.
And you lose out on your special rule, Shadows of the Dahan, which I don't even know what that does.
Well, it lets you target at infinite range if the land has Dahan and you pay an energy.
Oh, not much lost there. But yeah, no, I thought this was pretty cool. Again, it's still, the spirit still has the problem that, like, its growths are just not that interesting, and what it's doing really isn't that interesting. But I gotta say, I love being able to just solve a land just by placing my presence in it. Like, if there's just an explorer in a town, that feels really good. So I like this a lot more than base Shadows.
Yeah.
What do you think?
I feel like Madness encourages the gameplay style that I like with Shadows, which is growing into lands where they're going to ravage and blight, and you're going to sacrifice your presence to play Concealing Shadows, but that's okay because you get a fear for it, and the Strife really lets you do a lot more with trying to extend out your reclaim loop by growing more often. I think it encourages a lot of what I want Shadows to do, but it feels a little too clunky to me overall. Like, it doesn't, I don't know. Again, kind of like River, I want it to work better than it does.
I think it's pretty clear to say that this first batch of aspects, they were trying to be very careful about it, right? They didn't want these to be pushed. They didn't want it to be like, let's add an aspect to a spirit and make them crazy overpowered. They're trying to kind of just tweak little things about them, either make them use the newer tokens or fix maybe like a little problem with the spirit, or have it encourage a different gameplay style. It's a change. It's a change that I like, but it's also not that big a change, and it doesn't make me love shadows.
Yeah. I think that's actually a good point to segue to the other shadows aspect in this box, which is reach. And reach is like a very basic patch to shadows, which is to say that instead of paying an energy to get your infinite targeting, you get it only once a turn, but you don't have to pay for it. And I've heard a lot of players say that they just consider reach shadows the actual version of shadows that should have been printed. And if someone wants to play shadows who's a new player, they just hand them reach by default. And I don't really blame them for that. I think that reach really does accomplish a lot of the same feel as base shadows while still being a little bit more powerful and a little bit more flexible.
It helps a little bit, but if you don't like the spirit, I don't know that this is going to make you like the spirit.
I think that's true, yeah.
I think a minor content patch is exactly the right way to say it, right? It's not a major update. It's not a DLC for the spirit. It's just a little tweak. And hey, I think I agree that it is better, and I'd rather play it than base shadows. But between the two aspects, I think I'd rather just play the other aspect.
Yeah, and that's fair. I mean, I like base shadows, and so reach is actually somewhat appealing to me in that regard. But I also like base shadows enough that I just play base shadows. So, and I just ignore my special rule.
That makes sense.
I guess I generally find reach a little bit boring, but I'm glad that it exists, and I think it's a good thing to have in the game. Very minor patch relative to some of the other aspects that are in the other boxes, but yeah. Last aspect we have is resilience for Earth. This one doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand resilience.
Oh?
Yeah.
Really?
I mean, I know how it works. I just I don't understand why I would want to do this instead of playing base Earth. I guess just to spell it out, base Earth, your sacred sites defend 3. Resilience, instead of defending 3, they just reduce, or they make it so that the land doesn't blight unless it takes, I think it's 8 damage, or is it
10?
It's 10
no,
damage.
8
it
additional.
increases it by 8. Excuse me, 10 total damage. And so the thing is that I feel like what's interesting about Earth is this like Dahan puzzle where you're trying to get Dahan into ravaging lands with your sacred sites so that you can counterattack and clear invaders. Resilience is kind of this, it leans more into the stalling game of Earth, which I think is one of Earth's weaknesses, honestly, is that it gets too distracted by stalling and doesn't actually try to proactively win the game. And because Resilience can't protect Dahan at all, you go down to just having guard the healing land as your only real interaction with, or your only real defend on base Earth. And it just doesn't click for me. I've yet to have an enjoyable experience with Resilience, which is a little unfortunate, but I think that it just isn't my favorite aspect.
That makes a lot of sense. In my big 4 spirit game, it was nice to basically not have to worry about any land that it had a sacred zone in. Because, yeah, it is true that defending 3 is a little bit more like you have to think about what you're doing and putting Dahan places and all that stuff. Whereas this, you're right, it does just stall the game. And tangibly, it's like, is it really that different from what the regular version is? Like, I agree. I think it's a very forgettable aspect.
Yeah, if Reach is a very good minor content patch, I think Resilience is a not so good minor content patch.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I think Resilience is probably my least favorite aspect in the entire game, honestly, which is maybe a pretty extreme statement, but I'm having trouble thinking of one that I like. I mean, we talked about like Sunshine has problems, but I actually enjoy trying to make Sunshine work. I don't enjoy trying to make Resilience work.
Okay. Right, because we do talk about it, that spirits having flaws and problems and things they have to overcome is a good thing game design wise in general. It's just those flaws have to seem like things that are fun to overcome and are overcomeable versus just like, it's really annoying when I have 6 card plays and I only have 5 cards. Thank you, Lightning. Thank you. That's great. Like, that is not fun to me, like, or you have a ton of energy and then like 2 card plays. It's like, Yeah. So overall, again, aspects, great addition to the game. This particular batch of aspects, they're okay.
Yeah, they're okay. I think that they're the weakest batch of aspects in any box that has aspects, which isn't really that much of a criticism. But
yeah, there's only 3 boxes.
There's only 3 boxes of aspects. But like, I mean, I don't think the aspects are selling Jagged Earth for anyone. The way that aspects might sell Feather and Flame or Nature Incarnate for people.
If your favorite spirits in the game were those low complexity spirits from the base game, then seeing any amount of like support for them post them just existing in one box is great. Like, that's exciting news for you, you know? None of these are particularly my favorite spirit. I know you have a soft spot for River,
Yeah.
and I think that's why you're drawn to the fact that, cool, you have an extra challenge with River now. And I greatly appreciate that about Spirit Island, that it's easy to just pop out these characters, right? These playable characters in a game and just never do anything with them ever again. But Spirit Island's not content to do that, and I think that's good.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, but there's new spirits.
There's new spirits. Let's talk about them. There's 10 new spirits in this box. It's ridiculous how much there is here.
Oh, so many spirits.
Yeah. I think we're going to try and talk about them in complexity order. We'll start with the moderates and work our way up to the very highs.
Yes.
So I guess first thing to say is there are no low complexity spirits in this box. The lowest complexity, I mean, there's the aspects, I guess, are sort of the low complexity spirits in this box.
I think they're the fill-in, yeah.
Which is somewhat where we're starting with them. But the moderate spirits, there are 6 of them. There's 2 high complexity spirits and then 2 very high complexity spirits.
Ooh.
So let's jump into the moderate ones. Let's talk about Grinning Trickster Stirs Up Trouble.
Some of these spirits I've just played with before, frequently or infrequently. Some of these spirits I'd never played before, and I made sure to play at least one match with each of them before coming into this, except for Grinning Trickster Stirs Up Trouble and Fractured Days Split the Sky. I just want to say that, like, Fractured Days is my final boss in Spirit Island. I want to wait until I've kind of seen everything else before I tackle that, and I think it'd be cool to get like a first impressions on that one. And then Grinning Trickster is like very much kind of against my playstyle, so at some point I will try Grinning Trickster, but I think it would be much better for me to have kind of first impressions whenever we do that episode. If we do that episode.
So I think Grinning Trickster is actually a lot of fun. It requires leaning into uncertainty more than most spirits do. I mean, every spirit has some uncertainty. You know, what cards are you going to draft this game? What's the invader order that's going to come up? What's the event deck going to do? Grinning Trickster takes that and turns it up another notch. The main thing I'll comment on with it is that Let's See What Happens is a really cool power, and if you have no idea what to do with it because you're feeling intimidated by the whole minor deck, just target a land with a single explorer, preferably one that just explored. And that's going to give you pretty good odds of something beneficial happening. There are certainly people who have calced out like the entire minor deck and know, you know, oh, there's 30% chance of this happening. There's this much chance of hitting a blight adding card, this much chance of hitting a blight removal card. And I don't care much about most of that. I just sort of go with I'm going to target either that explorer or I'm going to target a land that I have no idea how I'm going to deal with it and just see if I get lucky with something. Because, hey, sometimes you pull Drought, and it's great, and you kill a city. And sometimes you pull Land of Haunts and Embers, and you don't kill that city, and you blight the land anyway, and then it blights and cascades afterwards. And that's part of the fun of Grinning Trickster for me. There's some more to the spirit, but I think without going into like a full episode on it, it's going to be hard to talk too much about everything that there is about it. So we'll save that for another time.
So this is the Strife spirit.
Yes. Other than like Pandemonium Lightning.
But they wanted to make sure that at least one spirit had like each token as its theme, and this is the one that has the Strife. So that's interesting. And it's the sort of thing that I'm not like 100% against the spirit, but it's not out in digital, and playing it I feel like in physical with my partner, I feel like it's asking a lot of her to put up with this nonsense. You know what I mean? Like I'm not hating on Trickster, but I'm just saying that it's the sort of spirit that's going to kind of warp the game a little bit and be wackier, and you have to make sure your play group is cool with that. That's what I'll say.
Yeah. Definitely one to make sure that the table's on board with you playing Trickster before you do it. All right, let's talk about next moderate, which is Lure of the Deep Wilderness. What do you think about this one, Alex?
Oh, I love Lure. Lure is one of my favorites from this box. I know not everyone is super up on it, but it's the inverse ocean, and it's also just probably the most like just spam tokens everywhere spirit in this box, and I think that's a lot of fun.
Yeah, it is. I've definitely seen a lot of people loving Lure. I feel like it doesn't click for me. I have played Lure a number of times, and I win games with it sometimes, but it isn't satisfying the way I want it to be, and I struggle with it a little bit into higher difficulties, I think, just because I'm not... I don't know if I'm not doing the game plan right, or maybe I'm leaning too much into certain cards over others. I know that one common trap I've heard about with this spirit is Softly Beckon Ever Inward is such a powerful card that some people try to just reclaim it too often, which can really set back your growth.
Yeah.
It's not my favorite, but I really don't mean to knock it. I understand that a lot of people like it, and I think it makes sense that they do. It's not for me personally as much.
It's definitely... I think the interesting difference between it and Ocean is that Ocean has a very clear, you bring stuff into the ocean and then it just dies. Whereas you have to work hard to make sure that you're actually destroying the things that you're luring into one land, you know? You can't, it's well and good to gather a bunch of things into a land, but if you're not taking the proper steps to use powers to destroy all these things and to properly move them all around, you're not really taking advantage of it. But yeah, no, really cool spirit, and yeah, one of my favorites from this box.
All right, Many Minds Move is one. This is the second beast spirit. Is we had Sharp Fangs Behind the Leaves and Branch and Claw, but now Many Minds Move is one is the second really, really heavily beast focused spirit. And this is a very strong spirit, for better or worse.
Yeah.
I don't know. It generates a ludicrous amount of fear. It specializes in defend powers, which defense in this game is generally very good, especially if you can position Dahan, which Many Minds can. It's got a really cool spatial puzzle with the beast tokens because it can gather and push at range 2 instead of range 1, which, again, that can be a bit of a double-edged sword where it's this cool puzzle, but it also can overwhelm a new player. I've heard many people complain that Many Minds should have been a high complexity spirit, not a moderate complexity spirit. I think largely because of the spatial puzzle.
This was my first time ever playing it. My partner has played the spirit a lot, so like I'm used to seeing it, but this is my first time playing it, and I won pretty easily. Medium range Brandenburg Prussia, and yeah, no, it was definitely fun. It was definitely powerful. My only criticism, what I will say, is that in some ways it feels maybe a little too close to Fangs. Just in that they're both all about beasts and all about moving beasts and your presence around the board. It's just a part of me that wishes they made it a little bit more different, but that's just my gripe.
It's interesting. I actually feel like the two of them are pretty different, but I don't know that... I don't know. I think of Fangs as more like offensive tempo, whereas I think of Many Minds as sort of this mid-range... almost like maybe even control type spirit.
I mean, it's my first time playing it, so I might be very wrong.
I get the similarity though of like it's still a spatial beast puzzle. Like that makes a lot of sense. If you like that about Fangs, you'll probably like that about Many Minds. If you don't like that about Fangs, you probably won't like that about Many Minds either. It doesn't fix that.
I do like that in both of them. I guess it's not necessarily a fault of this spirit. I just kind of wish there was a beast spirit in the game that maybe felt a little different from the other beast spirits, but that's okay. There's time for that later.
Yeah.
All right, shifting memory of ages. Let's not talk about it too much because it's going to be the next Spirit Spotlight episode.
Yeah. I guess let's just say really quick with it that it's a fun spirit. I'd prefer to have someone on my team playing it to playing it myself, and I'll go into more detail on that when we do our next Spirit Spotlight. But yeah, it's a cool spirit. It's very major focused. It does all kinds of fun things.
Yep, it's a very great support spirit, especially.
All right, let's move on to the king. Stone's Unyielding Defiance.
All right, Mr. Boring but Practical himself.
Yes, indeed. Stone is one of, if not the strongest spirits in the game, I think, for a few reasons. I don't know if just it gets rid of Blight as a loss condition, and that can be fun, and it's certainly powerful. It's not all that interesting some of the time.
Yeah, it takes away some of the decision too. Like, The top track is basically both tracks at once.
Yeah, and the bottom track is just all these elements.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying the bottom track is bad necessarily, but it's like it's kind of crazy that you could just do one of the tracks and be fine on card plays and be fine on elements. And also you get cards too. Like you get minor powers by taking it. I don't know, it's just they pushed everything with the spirit.
Yeah, Stone just feels to me like they had some really cool ideas and they put all of them onto one spirit and they just synergized too well.
It's also worth noting that this is one of perhaps the only spirit in this box of which you don't need anything from Branch and Claw to use. It only uses Badlands. It doesn't use any of the rest of the tokens. It's that weird smoldering volcano. We didn't really talk about this. There's a whole like system for how many of the rules you want to include in the game with this expansion. But yeah, I think for some people this might be the first spirit they play out of this box if they don't want to learn a ton of new rules.
Which to be fair, like, it's a good one for that, I think, is it has a solid game plan. It's not quite like an autopilot spirit. You're not going to take someone who's never played the game and just hand it to them and they start winning level 6 games. But you still need some planning and you still need some experience to really get it to work. But it is definitely like, it telegraphs its game plan pretty well. Get earth elements, put your land or presence down and stop blights. Like, it's great.
Yeah. This was one of the spirits that maybe the only one so far that I kind of got sick of. Like, I played 2 different adversaries from level 1 all the way up to level 6, 12 games in a row with this spirit, and it kicked butt. We won every single game. Like, it felt good, but after all that time, I'm like, I kind of want something where I'm making a little bit more decisions and struggling a little more. Like, it just felt... I don't know. I'm surprised this isn't a low complexity spirit. If I'm being completely honest,
I think because it uses the Badlands token, it kind of disqualifies itself. Which I don't know. That'd be my main thought as to why it's not low complexity.
Okay.
I do want to give it a quick special shout out for its ability to enable very low score or even negative score games. Because you can just take Blight from the box, you can get your island so covered in Blight that you can actually get a negative score in this game with Stone.
All right, so the last of the moderate complexity spirits is Volcano Looming High.
I think that Volcano Looming High is kind of cool in that there's 2 different, like, sort of tracks that people tend to play with it. Not like presence tracks, but Volcano has this innate that scales with how many presents you have, and up to, I think, 10 at the maximum. But it also can be used with 2 at the minimum. And so Volcano has this incentive to try and go really tall stacks of presents, but also incentive to go really small stacks of presents and just do these sort of small little eruptions, as opposed to this gigantic eruption that sort of wipes out the whole board.
Technically, you can even go down as low as just destroying 1 and then just using your special rule to do 1 damage in that land. I'm not saying that's advised, but you could you could do a tiny eruption.
There are cases where that might be relevant, yes. I've definitely had a land with like 3 or 4 Badlands in it where I wanted to destroy 1 presence to take out a couple of towns.
This spirit makes good use of the Badlands for sure. And it's an interesting spirit with both high strengths and high weaknesses. The fact that you can only ever get your presence in the mountains is certainly something to play around.
Yeah. On the flip side, though, anytime you have 3 or more presence in a land, you get +1 range with everything coming from that land. And so you can do things like Forests of Living Obsidian in an adjacent land and still get the Sacred Site as the origin land kicker. And so there's all kinds of interesting stuff about this spirit. I think my biggest criticism of it is probably that the 3rd growth option is a little bit too good, but I don't know that breaks the spirit for me. Like, I think there's still enough things going on in different directions that even if you're taking advantage of that growth being a little bit too powerful, you're still going to have like a fun time. You're still going to have challenge. It's not like the game is going to be on easy mode just because of that.
Yeah, that's the gain 1 power card, add a presence, +1 card play, and +2 energy.
Yeah,
it's the everything but reclaim option, basically.
Exactly.
It's cool that the spirit gives you all the way, like, it gives you ways to work around the problem. It's a problem spirit that has a very clear issue, and then it gives you that extra range. It gives you ways to deal with lands adjacent to the mountains pretty easily. I will say I don't particularly love playing the spirit solo, but that not every spirit can be great solo. So
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, not one of my favorites, but a solid spirit all around.
Next up, we're gonna move on to the high complexities, and the first high complexity is Shroud of Silent Mist. Not a fan.
This might be the only spirit in the game I don't like.
Okay. Tell me more.
Yeah. So obviously I still have to play some spirits, but okay. And listen, I came with research on this issue. The thing about this spirit is that, forgetting everything else about it, it is the only spirit in the entire game that has no growth option that gives you even one singular energy. It has a presence track that only gets you up to 2 energy gain. And a lot of the other spirits in the game that have low energy gain presence tracks, like, Ocean or Downpour, have very clear ways in their special rules of banking a lot of energy. This spirit, you get 1 energy only when you draft cards, and only if it doesn't have fire on it. What is with this design, Kalen? Please explain this to me.
I think Shroud is one of those spirits that, if I remember the stories I've heard about its development, is that it kept swinging between being way too weak and way too strong. And so it's one of those that probably got some kind of nerfs at the last minute. I mean, if you imagine, instead of its special rules saying gain an energy whenever you draft a card without fire, if instead it just had a 1 higher number on each of its spots on its energy track, it would be stronger. And that doesn't necessarily mean that it would be balanced at that point or particularly great at that point. But I don't know. To me, this is one that just it kind of missed the mark. It has a few really interesting things about it, and I really like some of the concepts it's trying to go for. But I do think that it just kind of, I think that you're right. I played a game recently with Shroud of Silent Mist and Shifting Memory of Ages, and I got to go completely crazy with Shroud because I pulled Entwined Power on Memory, and I could threshold it 3 times during the game, which gave Shroud an extra 9 energy. And
wow,
doing that, I managed to max my left innate once.
That's not a lot.
And that's not a lot. And most of the time, and I got up to 5 card plays, and I was playing 5 cards every turn, and I still wasn't maxing my left innate. I was still feeling tight on energy despite having gotten 9 extra energy from Memory. Yeah. And I think I also got Gift of Living energy and given it even more energy with that. It was feeling rough. But it was a fun game. It was still enjoyable, but it definitely felt like I was doing an uphill battle the whole way.
Yeah, that makes sense. This isn't like I'll never play this spirit again, but I just do not like it. And to be clear, the reason why the energy thing is frustrating is because when you're getting so low energy, and of course you're only getting that 3 energy if you have maxed the track out -1. I guess if you've gotten 3 presents off the top track, and potentially getting that 3rd energy when you're drafting a card, it just railroads you into, don't take major powers. It's a big, if you do, you could completely whiff on anything playable, or cool, you can play it once and then never again because you'll never have that much energy. And it just means you're very limited in minor powers. It forces you to just be very limited in everything you do, and what it does to make up for that is not great. Not great at all. What, you weaken invaders, you wound them, and then you get fear off of them to a maximum of 5 when time passes. That's all right, but guess what? Those invaders are still gonna ravage. They're not off the board. Looking at this spirit, more than anything, this is much worse version of Breath of Darkness down your spine.
I think it's probably more fair to say that Breath of Darkness is a much improved version of this, but
yes, because it's a later spirit, of course. But even the whole movement thing, right? One of the spirit's things is that you can target somewhere where you're not, and then move around and move into it. But once Incarna came out, that's not a special thing. And even at this point, you got Thunderspeaker, you got Fangs, you've got spirits that have mobility. That's not even that unique for the spirit.
I do like the mobility on Shroud, and the other thing is that you do actually get a little more energy as well that I forgot to mention out of the special rule, where if you have enough damaged invaders in your lands, you do get an energy a turn.
Oh, I didn't even see that.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm sorry.
You can get a little more than 3 energy a turn, but even then, I've definitely seen some discussion about arguments from a player on the Discord that if you lowered the cap on the fear Shroud would tend to get played better by people. And that kind of explains the sadness for me about this spirit. Shroud does best when you're not actually trying to make these fear farms that are kind of core to its gameplay. Like, it's best if you're just going ahead and destroying the invaders instead of letting them stick around. And that kind of just... It feels almost self-defeating in that regard. And I know we're bashing on it a lot, but, like, the idea of, we keep all the invaders alive to make them more and more scared. Like, I like that concept, but I don't feel like this spirit manages to do it in a way that is good in terms of gameplay.
Yeah, you throw them in your deep dark where they can't ravage or bother you. No, I know. I was very harsh on the spirit, and perhaps if we ever do a full episode on it, hey, maybe I could come up on it, but unfortunately it just seems very, very limited. And that's not very fun.
All right, the other high complexity in this box is Vengeance is a Burning Plague. And this one, I think, is a super interesting spirit that really encourages some different ways of thinking about the game.
Yes, so this is the disease spirit of this box.
So disease, it has a few ways of getting disease out. It has a unique power that adds disease. It has a growth option that lets you add disease instead of presence.
Yeah, you really get disease everywhere with this spirit.
Yeah, and then especially through this last one, which is when the invaders blight the land and your presence gets destroyed, you get to put disease out where the presence was. I find super cool that, like, it's this spirit of vengeance. It does better the worse things are going.
Yes, and I love the interplay where, so you have a special rule where you're able to not have the disease go away, but it'll allow the build instead. So it's kind of this push and pull between, do you want to remove the disease and let them, prevent them from building? Or do you want to leave the disease there because for a lot of your powers, you need disease to be able to even target the land. So you kind of are constantly making these decisions about should the token stay or should the token go? And I think that's really neat.
And this actually maybe gets back a little bit to Shroud, is that Vengeance has this kind of different approach to how you generate fear off of letting more invaders stay on the island. Is instead of the disease preventing the build, you get fear, but they still get more plastic out.
Yes.
And I believe some of that actually is probably tied to, if I'm remembering correctly, Shroud and Vengeance both came out of the same spirit concept in Branch and Claw design that hadn't really been finalized in time for Branch and Claw. And so the designers took the game and said, hey, let's split this out. And, I don't know too much of that story other than what I've heard secondhand, but you get a disease spirit that makes passive fear, and Shroud, which is sort of more the fear spirit that just focuses on the passive fear.
Very fun spirit. This was my first time ever playing as it, and I really liked it. I had a lot of fun. I lost the first game I played, but it made me really want to try it again and just really go for it. Because there is a lot of strategy around it. I think it is worth being a high complexity spirit. It's right on the money.
Yeah, this is one that I think has a ton of potential to be strong, but really takes a lot of experience to pilot.
Yeah, I mean, knowing when to allow the builds or not that's a decision you just constantly are making that could vastly make a big difference.
Yeah, absolutely.
I got the major power that allows you to put. What is it? It's like you put 2 disease down and then do a damage for each disease down or something like that. I got that major power when I was playing this, and I'm like, oh man, here we go.
All right.
Or it's something like defend in each land.
It's Blood Rack Plague. You defend in each in the target land and every adjacent land for however many diseases are in there. That card on Vengeance is just one of the funniest things in this game, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I am a fan of spirits that really just want their token out there as much as possible. And this spirit does. It's we saved the island, but there's disease everywhere.
Yes.
Yes.
One last thing I'll say on Vengeance is that it gets to treat Blight as Badlands for its powers, which is really cool. Again, with the worse things are going, the stronger this spirit gets. And given how much I talked about how much I love Badlands earlier, that is one of the highlights for me of Vengeance, is just being able to deal so much damage in these lands that have maybe taken a blight or even a cascade.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. I mean, that's a decision point in and of itself, right? Let it blight, and then you've got a Badlands there.
Yep.
All right, Kalen, tell us about Fractured Days Split the Sky. Why should I not be so scared of this guy?
I don't know. I think of this spirit as Fractured Days Break My Brain, because I'm still scared of Fractured Days, to be honest. I've played it a bunch at this point. Mostly on the digital version. I've played it a couple times in person, and Fractured Days is one of those spirits that is incredibly powerful. Like we talked about Stone being incredibly powerful, Fractured Days is right up in the same level. But Fractured Days takes so much skill to pilot, so much experience, and it's just really, really hard, I think, to know what you're doing because, and this is sort of a hallmark of it being one of the first very high complexity spirits, is you have to know your plan for at least the next turn or two. Not just the current turn, but like you need to be thinking about the future, which is kind of appropriate for a time-based spirit. But it's just, there's so much going on here. Fractured is capable of some of the most broken plays in the game. It can hit a thresholded cast down on turn 3, I think. Or is it even turn 2? I don't remember if it's 2 or 3. And it can do all kinds of other things. Slip the Flow of Time is one of the strongest support powers in the game. It lets you break the game in 2 when you combine it with things like Rampant Green. It's a very cool spirit. I wish I understood it better, but I've not been willing to break down and read a guide on it yet because for one, the guides that are out there for it are pretty intense to read. I did skim a little bit of one once, and I was like, this is not a guide. This is a textbook.
This is just quantum physics.
This is the quantum physics spirit. It's incredible and it's awesome, and it's more than I want to deal with most of the time. So I talked a little bit about wanting to have spirits on my team but not be piloting them myself. That's Fractured Days for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this spirit looks very cool, and it is something that, like, if this is a game that I'm going to end up playing for the next, the rest of my life or whatever, or 10 or 20 more years, it's cool to have something to want to reach for. When I'm out of everything else, when I have played every spirit and really understand them, like I want to shoot for this. Like I don't know. I think, and hey, maybe it'll happen sooner than later because of this podcast. I don't know, but very cool spirit that exists in the game. It scares me.
Yep.
Okay, and then the last one, Starlight Seeks Its Form.
Yeah, Starlight. There's another fan favorite, I think.
Yes, I think this is my favorite from the box.
All right.
Yeah.
Tell me more.
Yes. So, I mean, I don't have a ton of experience with this spirit, but I will say that in a way, it is the most accessible, very complex spirit, just because there's a lot of things that can go on with this spirit, but the way it works is not hard to understand. Basically, it just has a ton of different presence tracks, and then through completing those presence tracks, you get a bunch of different growth options. So do not give this to your friend who has analysis paralysis. Do not. You will be playing this game for 10 hours. Do not ever do that. But it is just really cool that it's a spirit that can adapt to whatever the situation needs. If you want to go for more damage, if you need to heal the island and remove blight, if you need to just push Dahan around, like, no matter what you're trying to do, this spirit has a way of doing it. And I think that that's just really cool and really fun. And it reminds me of, if you ever played the game like The Binding of Isaac or any other like roguelike games, usually there's a character, in Binding of Isaac's case, it's Eden, that is like kind of like a randomized character. Like it's a character that kind of every time you play it, it has different items and different abilities and different stats. And I think that this spirit is the closest thing to like one of those type of characters in games, and I think those types of characters end up being fan favorites just because after a while you get bored of doing the same thing over and over again, and so no matter how many times you play this spirit, there's so many different ways you can go with it. Obviously it's not infinite, but there's a lot of different ways that you can go, and I think that that's just really cool.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've hit most of it. The only thing I'll really add is that it's very intimidating to first approach Starlight, but I think it is the most approachable and the easiest, very high complexity to play. Just because I like I like the characterization of it as a funnel. I'm gonna make the KSP joke. Is that Starlight starts out really complicated, but as you lock choices in, it turns into much more of this comprehensible spirit. You lose some of that flexibility you had early on, but you get to sort of tech into whatever major you want to threshold. You get to tech into whatever innate you want to focus on, and that's this really cool thing that lets you just do so much with the spirit. It's a very good spirit. I cannot wait for it to come out in digital. I think I'm going to be playing it dozens of times.
Yes. And as an aside, I think it's one of the best, like, visually designed spirits. I love the art of the spirit and all of the cards on it. I think it's really neat.
Yeah, it's a very good spirit. I think Starlight is a home run from the design team.
Yes, fantastic.
I think that there's a lot of really fun, really new directions that this box takes with spirits.
Yes.
And that sort of sets like when people are talking about, oh, what box should I get next? Jagged Earth is often the first one recommended because even though it's not the cheapest box, it has these 10 spirits in it. And those 10 spirits can just do so many different things that it's amazing.
It's hard to categorize these spirits because although there are like a few kind of themes, like, okay, well, both Starlight and Memory use elements, like, two of them use like the Badlands, like there's things you could find in common between 2 or 3 of them, but overall it's such a widely diverse types of spirits and what they can do that I don't it's definitely not my favorite like collection of spirits altogether, but I think that if you were to ask anyone, there's at least 1 or 2 of these spirits that's like in everyone's top 3. I think that there's something for everyone in this box, even if not everything is for everyone.
There's always going to be some hits, regardless of the player. If they like Spirit Island, they're going to like something among these 10 spirits.
Yeah, like Fractured Days Hit Split the Sky is going to be some people's absolute favorite, and then it's going to be a spirit that some people never touch. Same thing with like Vengeance is a Burning Plague. Like some people just don't like the idea of blighting the island and putting disease everywhere or whatever, and some people think that it's a really cool thing to balance around. So I think that's cool, and I think this is definitely the expansion that they looked at it and they said, let's just do all the weird ideas we have for spirits and roll with it.
When we talk about like selling points on a box, I think the spirits are really the selling point for Jagged Earth.
100%.
As much as we like criticizing Shroud, I think pretty much all the spirits in this box are going to appeal to someone, and they're so good.
Yeah,
it's such a good set of designs overall.
Yeah, and even if you are in the low complexity field, hey, you've got your aspects. So overall, Jagged Earth, feelings, vibes.
I don't actually like it as much as Branch and Claw, which is probably an unusual take. Is that as a whole product, I think Branch and Claw adds more to the game than Jagged Earth does. And I feel a little crazy saying that, given how much I love Badlands, how much I just talked up the spirits 10 seconds ago. It feels like, I think that for this game as a whole and for the player base as a whole, Jagged Earth is the most important expansion that ever came out for Spirit Island.
Yeah.
But I personally just don't like it as much as Branch and Claw. And there's my take that everyone can tell me why I'm wrong on. So
no, Kalen, I think that we talked up Branch and Claw a lot in that episode. I think I would put Jagged Earth above Branch and Claw personally. If we're ranking the expansions, I think Jagged Earth is above it. If you know you're going to get everything in this game, then sure, get Branch and Claw first and kind of like slowly acclimate yourself. But if you're someone who you played the base box a bunch, but you don't know that you're going to want to play everything in this game, just get Jagged Earth and you'll have enough content for a long time. It might be more expensive, but it's going to give you the variety of spirits that you're not going to get with Branch and Claw.
We didn't even talk about the play options. We didn't talk about the adversaries. There's even more to this box than what we just covered in this episode, and part of why we're splitting it is there is so much in this box. It's got so much amazing content for this game.
Yeah, I mean, six players for some people that's a big deal, right? Not for me. I don't have that many friends, but but yeah, like there's a lot. There's a reason why the people making the digital version had to split the content up into many different parts, because it's a lot. So overall, a great addition to the game, and yeah, if you can only get one expansion, this is the expansion to get. And in fact, they've kind of gone out of their way to say that this is the one that you need in order to play future expansions. They're not going to make Nature Incarnate necessary for future expansions, but Jagged Earth absolutely is.
Yeah, I think that sort of says all of it about this one. I think that one thing I will add about why I think that people like it more is that a lot of people conflate some of the promo pack 2 content that's now in Feather and Flame with the Jagged Earth box. So that'd be like Finder, Downpour, and the other early aspect cards for the low complexity spirits. And we'll talk about that more with Feather and Flame some. And I think that some of that stuff is really good. And if that stuff was actually in the Jagged Earth box, I might actually feel differently. That might be enough to push me, because it adds another adversary, it adds 2 more spirits, it adds more aspects. Like there's a lot of cool stuff there that we haven't talked about at all, because again, not Feather and Flame episode. But again, I feel like that does get conflated in with Jagged Earth. Certainly, like when the digital version was talking about Jagged Earth coming out, lots of people are like, "Oh, I can't wait to play Finder," and it's like Finder's not technically in Jagged Earth.
Womp womp.
Promo Pack 2. Anyway,
it's like, well, technically, Promo Pack 1 came out before Jagged Earth, and then 2 came out after. But Feather and Flame is all one thing. It's like, whoa, okay, all right. No wonder why there's a post every other week on the Reddit of which one to get next.
Yeah. But yeah, Jagged Earth, great box. I think you're right to say that if you're only going to ever buy one expansion, buy this one. Even with my claim that I like Branching Claw more, that is in the context of I am someone who has bought all of the Spirit Island content in physical, in digital, I'm probably going to keep getting it because I like it so much.
Makes sense. All right, well, thank you guys for joining us. Come back soon for the different play options in Jagged Earth episode, as well as the Shifting Memory of... What's it called?
Yeah, Shifting Memory of Ages.
Okay, I wanted to say Shifting Memory of Days, but that's a different spirit. So
Fractured Days of Ages?
Yeah, come back for something soon. Bye!
Take care, everyone. Bye.